Today I'm going to be doing an underpainting, and this is the picture that I will be doing an underpainting of to eventually complete a final painting using the colors that are actually there, which are called local colors. This is the photograph. I took this at my parents' cottage in the summer. It's on Lake Erie, and I actually kind of played around with the colors a little bit more to make them a little bit more bright and intense. The colors that I will be using for my underpainting, I'm going to be doing what's called a complementary color underpainting, in which I paint the opposite colors of the colors that are actually in my photograph. So I will be using titanium white, I'll be using naphthol red light, I think that's how you pronounce it. I will be using alizarin crimson and Payne's gray, which is my favorite. And this is what my palette looks like. And to blend, I use matte medium. Liquitex is a favorite brand of mine. I also use water. Now I'm going to be starting with the sky, and the sky is it's a light blue. So I'm going to actually be kind of creating a kind of like a peachy color. And I could also probably use a little yellow if I wanted to make it more of that peachy color, which is a good idea. I'm going to actually grab a yellow. So I'm back now with a little cadmium yellow, and I'm going to mix a little of this with my red and a little of my alizarin crimson and some white to get kind of this like peachy, really pretty color. And I'm going to use this as the underpainting for the sky. Now an underpainting is what a lot of artists do to actually create kind of like a base painting. And I've done previous underpaintings using different shades of brown or monochromatic browns or blacks. But this is going to be, it's a monochromatic underpainting for the most part, but it's going to be the complementary color, or the color opposite of the color on the color wheel. So since my colors have mostly blues and greens, I'm going to be using the complementary color of blue, which is orange, and green would be the complementary of that would be red. So I will be beginning with the sky. And I'm using kind of a medium angle brush, just because it's honestly what I have on hand. You can use any large brush. And I actually just kind of darkened it a little bit because it was just looking too kind of bland for me. Now what's going to happen is, if you look at my clouds, there's a lot of white areas for those clouds, and I'm going to actually leave those areas kind of white. So I'm adding a little white, like I have some of the white area kind of showing through where the cloud is, but I'm actually adding some white, and while the paint is wet, I'm actually going to add some of that. I'm using acrylic paint, and acrylic dries really, really fast. A lot of artists don't like it for that purpose, but I like it because it dries really fast. I'm a really impatient person by nature, so by doing this underpainting, I want to be able to paint on this soon. So by using acrylic, I'll be able to probably in 15-20 minutes. So notice the strokes that I'm using to create these clouds. They're very wispy. Not a lot going on right now with them. Just kind of showing the overall illusion. And clouds up high in the sky are going to be fluffier and larger. And the ones that are more towards the horizon line, so like near those are going to be smaller and flatter because they're further away. Okay? So I'm going to continue painting these clouds. Now right now I'm going to kind of show where my horizon line is going to be, so I'm going to kind of end it right here just so I know that if you look at my picture that my horizon line is about right up here, and then I have all this space. So when I'm looking at my canvas, and I know it's hard to see, but this is going to be my horizon line. I'm going to have all this space left for the water and the actual ground, which is here. Okay, so that's what I'm doing right now, is just adding that line in so that I can see it. And a really important thing is making it straight. And I usually have issues with that sometimes. So because the horizon line is it's a straight line. So I'm going to work on this right now. Right now I just added a little water to my paint, and it's almost going to make it almost like a watercolor wash when I put it on the surface. Now the underpainting is just to kind of give yourself a layer of color, get rid of the white of the canvas, and I actually like a lot of, or not a lot, but I like the underpainting to kind of show through in certain areas. So that's kind of why I'm using the complementary color, because I kind of like having that pinkish, peachy color kind of popping through the blue of the sky. This just gives me a nice roadmap to work. And some artists don't like to do this, and that's totally fine. This is just a process that works for me, that I enjoy doing. I want to kind of just show you, there's my picture, and that's kind of my sky. And I actually, if you look at my sky, I have a lot more clouds than are actually in the picture, but that's okay. It just kind of gives myself a roadmap on where to go with that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting in the land right where my horizon line is, and I'm going to use a darker red because it's green and I want to use the complementary color, so I'm going to be using my Payne's gray and some red. So that's what I'm going to start next, and I'm still using my trusty angle brush here. Okay, so if you look at my mixture, it's kind of creepy looking, but it's red. I have the red and my alizarin crimson and a little Payne's gray. So right along the horizon line, I'm using the angle brush just to kind of create this illusion of land, because it's an island. The photograph I'm using has an island in the distance, and value, or the lightness or darkness of something, is very important. So notice how I'm just using my brush, I'm just stamping it. So I have paint on my brush, just kind of stamping it. And I'm going to put some lights and darks in there. I have just plain Payne's gray now, and I'm kind of just towards the base of the island. It's more in shadow than the top because the sun's hitting the top. So it's going to be darker along the base of the island. So I'm kind of putting that in right now. It's getting a little dark, so I'll probably add a little red, like lighter red in there. And I'm about finished with just the underpainting, obviously part of this. The trick to painting land or anything kind of in the distance is making sure that it has very irregular rhythm. And what I mean by that is that it's not all the same size, because nature grows at all different rates, you know, and that's what makes nature interesting. So nature is a really good example of irregular rhythms. You don't want any of these trees, because these are trees in the distance, you don't want any of these to be the same size. If they were all the same size, they would look kind of boring. So this is my underpainting so far, and it's just the sky and the land. So the next thing I will be starting is the water, which is blue and green, so there will be definitely peaches and reds in there. So here's the color that I will be using for my water. It's a little bit darker than the sky, but I still wanted it to be kind of like a pretty peach color because I wanted some of the underpainting to pop through, so I didn't want it to be a color I don't like. So, but it's a little bit darker because if you look at my picture, the sky is darker than the water is darker than the sky. So then here's my sky so far. So here's the water, and it's just a little bit darker. And I'm using my angle brush again, and I will be adding just a little water to it, just to make it blend. This is almost like a little watercolor underpainting. Not a lot of detail. Underpaintings don't have to take you long at all. Like, I'm doing this pretty quickly here. You don't have to have a lot of detail. You just want to really focus on the lightness or darkness that you see, which is called the value. So I'm going to continue with this, and if you look at my painting, or my picture, there are some more greenish areas towards the island, and it's a little bit bluer, so I'm going to kind of make it more red back towards the island, because remember, doing complementary colors, so red is the complement of green, so then whatever's closest to me, the blue is a little bit closer, I'll make that a little bit peachier and a little bit lighter. So here's kind of that peachier color I was talking about using for like the lighter blue part of the water. And I'm just using water and a little matte medium to kind of blend it in. And this is all going to be covered up with blues and greens for the most part, but it just gives me a nice base. So here's the thing though, I'm coming upon where that land is, and then the dock I'll do over the water when it's dry, but the land, it kind of comes at an angle, I believe, about here. And it kind of pops over. So I'm just going to kind of put that in for myself, kind of like I just did for the horizon line, just so I know where it goes. Alright, so I'm going to rough that in. And then if you look here, it's actually darker. So in here I might start putting some more darks, maybe a little more Payne's gray. I kind of like this orangey color so much that I'm going to kind of add it back into my sky a little bit, because I went a little too crazy with the clouds when I was doing my underpainting. So see, like there's a lot less clouds than what I have in mind. So I'm going to add a little of this orange in there. I think it would be kind of a pretty thing to show through in the overall finished. Here's a better picture of what I have going so far. The sky, the land, the water. Now I have to start kind of playing with the other land. The land in the foreground, or what's closest to the viewer. This is the foreground. This is the middle ground. This is the background. So this might sound silly, maybe a little crazy, but if you look at my foreground or my land, it's got like a yellowish tint to it. If I'm doing complementary colors, then that means this is going to be kind of a light purple, because yellow and violet or purple are complementary colors. So I'm going to be getting some blue and adding it to my red to make kind of a purpley color, which could be kind of fun or kind of weird. I don't know, depending on what you think. So let me grab those. So I just put some cerulean blue on my palette. I'm going to mix it with the red and the white and get kind of a really light violet color. Whoa, wait, that was too much red. A light violet color for this foreground. Maybe more white. I'm just going to add pure white to this because it's very light. But that will be so pretty, kind of popping out of that yellow, I think. So I'm going to just be adding this violet, very light. Actually, I'm almost adding just plain white with the color I already have mixed to make it this light. So I'm going to just spread that along the bottom here. So this is what it looks like with that real light, almost violet, very, very light violet foreground. And the next thing that I will be doing now is actually adding a little of this red. Well, it's green here, the green little snippets of grass, but since I'm doing complementary, I'm going to add more red. And then I will be doing my lovely dock. So I'm using the alizarin crimson just to kind of almost dry brush the texture of the green in there. So just alizarin crimson, dry brush. So this is kind of what it looks like, very loose, just to kind of give the illusion of it being there. The next thing I'm going to do is start with that dock. So I have this really nice filbert, and a filbert is kind of like a flat and a round mixed together. I have white on it because I'm going to use it to draw my line. And this is real loose, just kind of figuring out where things go. And I'm going to kind of connect them. And I should really be using a ruler, but it's hard to videotape and use a ruler and paint at the same time. And then, so what I'm looking at is there's all these different vertical areas that I'm going to kind of rough in. This is how it's kind of coming along right now. I'm just using lights and darks to kind of indicate the values where the dock would be. And this is kind of all how the overall picture is looking at the moment. And I'm going to add a little bit more value with the dock, and then I will probably start painting the real local colors on top, which are the blues and the greens that you see in my photograph.